Holler back when you see me. Young buck, bucking them down.
But for me, I'm not gonna come out of my element of who I am as an artist to follow no wave. I'd rather ride my own wave that I create, or I would rather, if it's something that I could do that's in my own lane to add to the wave, of course.
Now, after repeated violations of his bond supervision, Tennessee native and straight out of Cashville rapper Young Buck now is to serve time.
So Sumner County officials say there was a hearing earlier this week to revoke bond for David Darnell Brown, otherwise known as Young Buck.
Before Young Buck ever joined G Unit, he was one of Nashville's most feared 13-year-olds. From stories of him pushing coke on Buchanan Street from that young age, to even surviving an infamous 11-shot shootout, his legend was cemented early.
That whole shooting situation was a fucked up situation. Thank God I made it through.
Years later, he proved that same edge on a bigger stage, stabbing Jimmy James Johnson, the man who attacked Dr. Dre at the Vibe Awards.
I just seen Dre doing this shit, you know what I mean? Going for what he could, you know what I mean, at the time. But I just seen him getting down, you know what I mean?
Here's the story of how David Brown went from a teenager running the streets of Nashville to become Young Buck, the deadly G Unit member the world got to know of. Born David Darnell Brown on March 15, 1981, Young Buck grew up in North Nashville's Cumberland View housing projects, a place everyone called Dodge City. The nickname wasn't meant to be clever. It was earned after decades of shootings, gang wars, and police sirens that echoed through the neighborhood every night. For kids like David, survival wasn't just a choice, it was the only way forward. And so, while other children woke up thinking about cartoons or toys, David woke up thinking about how to help his mother put food on the table.
I found myself at a point in time living my life out here where, I did whatever it took to survive in a sense.
His mother, Audrey Horn, was a single parent, raising not only her own children, but also her sister's kids. That meant 6 mouths to feed, 6 pairs of shoes to buy, and 6 dreams to somehow keep alive in a world that kept trying to crush them. She
also had, and still to this day, have custody of her sister's children. So, and that was 3 of my mom's sister's children were almost like my brothers.
She had once worked steadily at Meharry Medical College, but when a merger stripped away her job, the family's fragile balance collapsed. Bills piled up. The refrigerator was often half empty. And every day, Audrey's children saw how hard she fought to hold everything together.
My life started to change once my mother lost her job in the middle of a merger of a hospital.
Meanwhile, David's father, James Brown, was nowhere to be found. His battle with pulled him out of his son's life almost completely.
I did whatever it took to survive in a sense. And, the father that I known of at the time is who I spoke on, just to be actually totally honest with you.
And without a father figure, David turned to the streets to find guidance. But the streets of Dodge City were not forgiving. They demanded toughness, loyalty, and sometimes violence just to exist. Even as a child, David's spirit for survival showed itself. At just 8 years old, he pumped gas at the Shell station on D.B. Todd Boulevard. By 9, he was mowing lawns and washing cars for spare dollars. And while some saw just a boy hustling for pocket change, those who knew him could already see the hunger in his eyes. He wasn't simply working for candy or toys. He was working for survival, for dignity, for a way to help his mother breathe a little easier.
At a very young age, between 11 and 12, I was already out and kind of had it figured out on how to get money out here.
But the longer David stayed in Dodge City, the more he was pulled toward a different kind of hustle. At just 13, he stepped into the drug trade, selling marijuana and crack on Buchanan Street, just a short walk from his home. This was when the nickname Young Buck stuck. Older dealers recognized his youth and his drive, calling him Buck because he was young but already moving like a seasoned hustler. And then came a turning point. An older hustler named Priest noticed the boy's ambition and decided to teach him the street code. Priest showed him how to avoid police attention, how to handle disputes without getting himself killed, and even put out word to others, "Leave the young one on alone, watch over him instead. This protection allowed Buck to grow into the dangerous yet respected figure he would later become. But with recognition came enemies, and with enemies came bullets. The same streets that had raised him were now testing him, pushing him into moments where survival would mean dodging death itself. Life in Dodge City was never safe, and for young Buck, danger was part of his daily routine. Therefore, to understand how he survived, you have to understand what Dodge City really was, a battlefield. The streets of North Nashville were controlled by different gangs, and each one was fighting for power, money, and respect. The Dodge City Young Gunnas, DCYG, were one of the most feared groups because they were violent and deeply involved in robberies and deals. Police even described their leader, Cleveland Shaw, as the shot caller, but they were not the only gang Buck had to deal with. The Rollin' 40s Neighborhood Crips, the East Nashville Crips, Rollin' 90s, and the Gangster Disciples all had members roaming the streets. Meanwhile, the Vice Lords had strong sets like the Conservative Vice Lords and the Ghost Mob, and Latino crews like Brown Pride, 218, and MS-13 were growing fast. In fact, the Crips were spreading so quickly that they became one of Tennessee's biggest gang networks.
Nashville has had recurring gang issues off and on, just like every other large city in the country.
For a teenager like Buck, this world was dangerous, but it was also the only world he knew. His name was starting to spread not just because Priest put words to others, but also because he wasn't afraid to stand up for himself. As a result, his reputation made him a target. Street stories tell of Buck being robbed late at night and attacked by rivals who wanted to test him. So, to survive, he had to adapt. He learned how to hide a gun without drawing police attention, and he studied the unwritten rules of moving through gang territories. Because Priest had taught him to always stay alert, Buck managed to escape more than one dangerous situation. Yet, every new lesson also came with bigger risks. And then the most dangerous moment came in the year 2000. Buck was already making money from selling drugs, and people in the streets knew it. So one night, armed men broke into his house. They came looking for cash, but what followed was chaos. Gunshots exploded inside the house, and Buck was hit more than once. One bullet tearing through his arm, another striking his thigh. He might have died right there, but his friend D-Tay acted quickly. D-Tay grabbed a gun and fired back, wounding one of the attackers. Because of this, the intruders ran away. Meanwhile, neighbors rushed over after hearing the gunfire, and they carried Buck to safety. He was rushed to Vanderbilt Hospital, where doctors worked to save him. He had lost so much blood that he needed a transfusion. Even though he survived, it was clear how close he had come to death. Lying in that hospital bed, Buck had time to think, and those thoughts changed him. He realized that if he stayed in the streets, he would not live long. Therefore, he made a choice. Later, he explained, "After making it through that whole situation, I just vowed to myself that I can't do the both of them. I gotta choose. Either I'm gonna be in these streets and hustle, or I'm gonna be in this music business and hustle." That night forced him to see the truth.
And out of my ordeal back in the streets, I ended up getting shot in a home invasion and a robbery. One in the arm and one in the upper thigh area. It was enough for me to wake up and really realize that, yo, if I keep going on like this, I'm either to get killed or I'm gonna go to jail. And I really realized that because I was getting down for real. Really started to devote more of my time to the music then, the studio, period.
The streets were always waiting to swallow him, but music offered a way out. So he decided to leave the street hustle behind and put his energy into music. That decision in the hospital wasn't just talk, it became Buck's new mission. From that moment on, every ounce of energy he once put into the streets, he now poured into music. And so, instead of standing on corners, he was standing in studios. Instead of hustling crack, he was hustling verses. Because for Buck, music was no longer just an escape, it was survival by another name. By the time he was 14, he was grinding hard freestyling at every chance, recording on mixtapes, and building a reputation in Nashville's underground scene. Step by step, the same determination that had kept him alive in Dodge City was now pushing him forward as a rapper. And soon, those efforts opened the door to something much bigger, a connection that would take him all the way to New Orleans and into the orbit of Cash Money Records. charts. Between 1995 and 1997, at just 14, Buck caught the attention of Brian "Baby" Williams, better known as Birdman. Birdman had co-founded Cash Money Records with his brother Slim, and their label was quickly rising into a powerhouse in Southern hip-hop. Because Birdman was always on the lookout for hungry young talent, Buck's raw energy stood out. When the chance came to audition, Buck didn't hesitate.
And then at 14, you performed in front of Birdman?
I did. Changed my whole entire life into the music business. That's where my journey started.
And in true street fashion, his audition wasn't a polite introduction. It was a freestyle face-off against another teenage prodigy, Lil Wayne. That battle became legendary in Buck's story. Lil Wayne was already being as Cash Money's star, and Buck stepped up with everything he had. Even though Wayne had the home advantage, Buck impressed Birdman with his fearless delivery. As a result, he earned himself a place under the Cash Money banner in 1997. Life changed quickly after that. Buck moved to New Orleans and began spending long stretches at Birdman's mansion, and while he was still only a teenager, he was suddenly living among rappers who were shaping the sound of Southern hip-hop. He built a close bond with Juvenile, one of Cash Money's leading voices, who often encouraged Buck and treated him like a little brother. Meanwhile, sparring sessions with Lil Wayne kept him sharp, pushing him to raise his game every day. However, the experience was not as glamorous as it seemed. Because Cash Money had a roster full of stars, Buck found himself waiting in the background. He recorded verses, traveled with the crew, and even appeared in the Big Timers' Big Ballin' music video. But his own music never got released. And while Juvenile and Lil Wayne were climbing the charts, Buck felt stuck in place. Year after year passed, and frustration began to grow. He had left the streets behind to focus on music, but now, music wasn't giving him the breakthrough he wanted. By 1999, he realized he couldn't keep waiting for an opportunity that never came.
After being there for like a week or so of sitting around, I started to get a little itchy. Like you said, I done became a man now. It ain't like I was a child. I got things going on at home, and I came with that mind frame like, if it ain't no business here for me, I'm gonna keep it moving.
So, he made the painful decision to walk away from Cash Money.
I was always looking for opportunity. I seen opportunity, I took it. I was supposed to be in school at the time. I dropped out of school. I left school and went straight to New Orleans. In 2 years of my life, I hung up under Baby, kind of like back and forth. Out of those years, I mean, they progress was happening. You never even heard me on a project. Time passed and I'm watching all this success and not seeing nothing happen for me. It became a time where I was like, it ain't gonna work for me, so I said, back in the streets.
When Buck returned to Nashville, reality hit hard. He had spent years chasing a dream in New Orleans, only to come home empty-handed, and because he had no steady income, he had to start all over, as he later put it. For a while, he went back to the only thing he knew would bring quick cash, hustling in the streets. Yet this time, it wasn't about staying in the streets. It was about funding his true passion. Every dollar he made was meant to push his music further, to buy studio time, and to keep his dream alive. The years with Cash Money hadn't made him rich or famous, but they had taught him something just as valuable: how the industry worked, what it took to survive in music, and why hunger mattered more than comfort. And so, even though Buck came back broke, he came back wiser, sharper, and more determined than ever. Because for him, failure in New Orleans wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of another chapter. Coming back to Nashville wasn't easy for young Buck. He had left New Orleans with nothing to show for his years at Cash Money except experience, determination, and hunger. Once he returned home, he knew he couldn't wait for a label to open doors. He had to take control himself. That's when he started selling CDs hand to hand at the Citgo gas station near Tennessee State University. For Buck, this wasn't just hustling, it was survival turned into strategy. He spent $300 to press 1,000 CDs and sold them for $10 each. The math worked. Every batch meant thousands in profit if he put in the grind. Soon he realized he was making more money off music than hustling drugs. That was the moment he decided to convert totally over to just music. The independent hustle led to his first breakthrough. In 2000, alongside his friend D-Tay, he dropped Thuggin' to the End. Unlike most mixtapes floating around, this was a serious project that charted number 34 in the US R&B charts and 17 on the independent charts. It even pulled in about $10,000 in sales, proving Buck could thrive without a major label. Momentum carried him to Memphis, where DJ Paul of 3 6 Mafia gave him his first big look with a placement on Memphis from their album When the Smoke Clears. Buck's name began spreading beyond Nashville and deeper into the South. Soon after, Juvenile reappeared with his new label, UTP Records. Their bond made the move natural, and Buck signed on. Between 2000 and 2002, he released Born to Be a Thug and a compilation with the UTP Playas. These projects built his buzz, showing he wasn't just surviving, he was building something real.
Juvie happened to pull up at the office, and when he pulled up, he was kind of shocked to see me there. I'm like, I've been here for a whole week. And he was like, man, you want to get up out of here for a minute? You know what I'm saying? And I took that ride with Juvie, and that's where my career started.
By the early 2000s, Buck had carved out a reputation for gritty, authentic street lyrics. From gas station hustles to regional albums, his name was ringing louder in the South. But Buck wanted more than neighborhood fame. He wanted the big stage, and that's exactly what fate was about to give him through a rising star from Queens named 50 Cent. By the early 2000s, young Buck's grind had carried him farther than many believed possible. He had gone from selling tapes at a gas station to building momentum with UTP. Nashville respected him, the South was starting to notice, but the world hadn't heard his name. That changed when fate introduced him to one of the hungriest rappers in the game, 50 Cent.
And basically 50, you know, heard the record and liked the record, seeing what he's seeing in me, gave me the biggest opportunity of my life.
The meeting happened almost by chance. In 2001, while on tour with Juvenile in New York, Buck crossed paths with 50 Cent and Lloyd Banks on Juvenile's bus. At that time, 50 was still a street legend hustling mixtapes after surviving 9 bullet wounds, but not yet signed to Eminem. Buck seized the moment, playing him Bloodhounds. The gritty energy hooked 50 instantly. He bought the track and promised Buck that if he landed a deal, he'd come back for him. Most promises fade in the music business, but 50 wasn't like most. By 2002, after signing with Shady/Aftermath, he remembered the hungry kid from Nashville. With Tony Yayo locked up on a gun charge, 50 called Buck and offered him a spot in G-Unit. For Buck, it wasn't just a break, it was destiny. The results were immediate. In 2003, G-Unit dropped Beg for Mercy, storming onto the charts at number 2 with 377,000 first-week sales. Within months, it was multi-platinum, cementing the crew as hip-hop's new powerhouse. For Buck, it was validation. After years of hustling and near-death brushes, he was finally on the biggest stage. Yet Buck wasn't just a side player. In 2004, he released Straight Outta Cashville, a clever nod to his Nashville roots. The album debuted at number 3, sold 300,000 copies in its first week, and went platinum, breaking Nashville's curse that had kept non-country artists locked out. Suddenly, Nashville wasn't just country, it was hip-hop too. But with fame came controversy. That November at the VIBE Awards, Dr. Dre was blindsided when a man named Jimmy James Johnson punched him in the back of the head. Chaos erupted. Cameras caught Buck rushing into the melee, allegedly stabbing Johnson in the chest, collapsing his lung. Charged with assault, Buck pled no contest and received probation plus community service. The headlines were proof. No matter how far he climbed, the violent shadows of his past followed close behind. For Buck, G-Unit was both a dream realized and a storm survived. Glory and infamy tangled in the same breath. At first, young Buck's rise with G-Unit seemed unstoppable. His energy gave the crew a southern edge, and his debut Straight Outta Cashville shattered expectations, debuting at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and quickly going platinum. But behind the platinum plaques, tension was brewing. The trouble began with money. By 2008, Buck claimed he had never seen a royalty check from G-Unit, saying he survived only on show money. His manager, Shaw Money XL, insisted Buck had cleared over $10 million, but Buck dismissed the claim as fiction.
You know, the checks were being sent to G-Unit Incorporated or whatnot, which is 50 Cent's company. So of course, I got those 3 years of checks right then and there. But then the question started to come about is, where's all the other money there? Where did that go? So instead of me, coming at a negative approach or whatnot, they were the ones that stressed out to 50 and let him know that going forward, they were gonna see me my own checks.
This financial strain only deepened as he clashed with 50 Cent. 50 allegedly blocked him on Instagram and even his call number.
From that moment, 50 blocked me from Instagram. I'm sure his phone numbers as well. And everything that the world sees now started to play out.
Part of the rift came from loyalty. Buck refused to fire Shaw Money XL, even after 50 fell out with him, while other G-Unit members cut ties. He also angered 50 by associating with rivals like The Game, Jadakiss, and Lil Wayne. To 50, this was disloyalty. To Buck, it was survival in a business where bridges mattered more than beef. Add in missed sessions, abuse allegations, and public statements Buck would later walk back, and the relationship fractured beyond repair. On April 7, 2008, 50 Cent went live on Hot 97 and announced Buck was out of G-Unit as a group, though still signed as a solo artist. The fallout turned public and ugly when 50 leaked a taped phone call of Buck crying, asking for advice and admitting tax troubles. Buck later said he felt betrayed. His pain had been turned into entertainment. Worse, 50 allegedly blocked him from releasing music, trapping him in a contract he couldn't escape. The strain pushed Buck into bankruptcy twice. First in 2010 after an IRS raid over $300,000 in tax debt, and again in 2020 as he tried to free himself from his G-Unit deal. Even today, disputes over alleged debts to 50 linger, creating a cycle where his legal problems and financial battles became deeply intertwined. And the controversies didn't end with G-Unit. Buck faced years of legal issues, a 2010 IRS raid that uncovered a gun.
They found this 40 Glock in my home during the IRS raid from taking things out of my home. When they first found the gun, I looked and they was like, well, whose is this? And I said, that's my tour manager's gun, which it was. He's licensed to carry, I guess he had left it in one of the rooms or whatnot. And it was nothing to them. They kept the gun and took it with them. 8 months later, I get indicted from the federal government on felon in possession of a firearm.
An 18-month prison sentence, a 2012 drive-by shooting, and repeated arrests for domestic disputes between 2016 and 2022. These cases showed a recurring pattern: violations of probation terms, firearm restrictions tied to his felony record, and constant run-ins with the law over personal conflicts. The problems followed him into 2025. In April of that year, Buck was arrested for contempt of court in Sumner County, Tennessee. The violation stemmed from missing bond meetings while awaiting trial on fresh assault and weapon charges. As a result, he was sentenced to 30 days in jail. To outsiders, it seemed like yet another example of Buck sabotaging his own freedom. To Buck, though, it was part of the same struggle he had been locked in for years, trying to move forward while his past refused to loosen its grip. For Buck, every triumph seemed shadowed by controversy. His talent was undeniable, but so was the turbulence. Time after time, just as it looked like he was turning a corner, another headline or courtroom appearance dragged him back into the cycle. The constant push and pull between his artistry and his demons made his journey both inspiring and tragic. A man forever fighting to rise above the weight of his past while the world refused to let him escape it.